Good afternoon. This is Media Center Ukraine, Odessa. We continue our work. And our second briefing is dedicated to integration of Ukraine into the EU and the possible support the Ukrainian economy during the war and the support of business. Now we have with us Dovidas Vitkauskas, director of the charity organization SOS Ukraine, ex-head of large projects of the European Union on reforms in Ukraine, and Vasylis Bumbaras, executive director, directorate of the construction company Hephaestus. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all participants, and I would like to thank Vasylis for being with us today. We were supposed to have Tarasenko, MP, and the active supporter of reforms in different sectors where I have been involved for the last 5 years. Today I'm here representing Lithuania, not the EU in general. And our task for today is to discuss how Ukraine should and could support business to survive in these difficult times, how Ukraine can allow business to work and earn, how to create the fair conditions for domestic and foreign businesses. For us, not only to expect other countries to support Ukraine, but for Ukraine to be able to support itself. And I think this is the main topic of our today's briefing. Mr. Bumbaras, can you lean closer to the mic, please? I fully support what Dovidas had just said. Today, we have been fighting the same enemy, and I'm sure that we will win. But I believe that the biggest fight will be after our victory. I'm now talking about our internal enemy. And these are reforms and these are experience of other countries that we should use to fight our enemy. And our enemy is the corruption, which doesn't allow to have European investments here. And this is not due to the fact that we have bad economy or bad resources or that we don't have potential. We have everything. The EU and the United States know this, and Russia knows this. But we have one thing that doesn't allow us to get all the investments, because the system is very hard to predict. This is the main problem. If we have European investors here, the business plans are significantly better than what we have in the European Union now. And I'm well aware of the business in Ukraine, and I can compare the situation here with the situation in the EU countries. But when investors can't understand how to, regardless of the sector, achieve some specific objectives, and when unfortunately almost every law can be gone around, it is very difficult to achieve our joint objective, which is the European Ukraine and the attraction of investments for not only business to earn, but also to improve the life of our people. Thank you. Tell us, please. You've mentioned that there should be some steps taken for Ukrainian business to be supported by the state. What would you like to share with us now? I can just continue the words of Vasylis. The first indicator for Ukraine to work on is predictability. Predictable rules of game, predictable legal framework, and the behavior of the state, partners, the society, and clients. And historically, there was the lack of this predictability. There were breakthroughs. There were the stages when the reforms were sped up, especially starting from the Maidan. And both administrations of Poroshenko and Zelensky have done a lot to improve the situation. But even before the war, we did not achieve the proper level of the predictability due to the weak institutions, due to the weak judicial power, which shall guarantee the predictable rules in a normal state. The weakness of law enforcement bodies that usually protect the interests of several people but do not follow their inner rules and values. Even before the war, there was the lack of this predictability, and we could see different examples in the society, starting from the illegal construction site in Odessa and to different type of the cases when the law enforcement system was used as the tactical leverage to achieve one's own objectives. I used to work for 5 years in Ukraine, and I worked for more than 15 years in such areas. What is the reasons of the lack of predictable rules? First of all, this is a weak political system when there are no parties but persons, not ideology, which are responsible for the policy. The lack of ideological discussions, and the fact that leaders inclined to use politics just to meet the needs of the society at a certain period of time, what we call populism. So they promote popular but not necessary politics and policy. So you need to develop the systems to have parties, but not personalities. Short-term approaches in the political and business areas. The parties are created for a short period of time for the election campaign, and businesses are created for a short period of time just to earn money quickly. And if you have short-term interests, you can use the manual approach to solve issues. You don't need some powerful institutions or judicial system. So there was no demand for clear rules from the politicians and the business. And Ukraine have not fought enough for these rules. But there are advantages of the ongoing situations. There is the advantages of the war. The weakness of the institutions just had its own advantages, because to build from the scratch is easier than to reform the deep roots of the state, of the country. And I think that the Ukrainian leadership, Ukrainian society, businesses, foreign donors shall aim to build the new system based on the long-term rules. Thank you. Do our journalists have questions to our guests? Yes. The floor is yours. Dmitro Bogomolov, Live News. Can you tell us about the specific projects that are offered to implement in the nearest future, basing on the principle that you've just mentioned? Can you tell us about the support of international partners, the volume of this support in the nearest future? Thank you. Privatization of land, and this is a key element, the key DNA of the Ukrainian society. And the process has not been finalized. And there was the law adopted on privatization of land, and it came into force in summer last year. But this is not enough in terms of the practical implementation in the society. So I would recommend to quicker create specific conditions to allow privatization of lands basing on the transparent and honest principles. Why do we need this? Because nothing can exist, including the market economy, without the private property. There is no motivation to develop your business. And the private property can, to a certain extent, guarantee to get autonomy from the state. When people have their own land, home, territory. So Ukraine should work on creating practical, honest, transparent conditions to ensure privatization of land. And for me, this is a very important project that we should work in the upcoming future on. Of course, I agree that privatization is the most important thing here. As of today, I can see that the war provides certain possibilities for people. There is the lack of resources, materials. People try to find the way out. There is an important issue that we should focus on. This is the delivery of goods to Ukraine and the control of value of these goods on the central level. Let's take generators. When everyone understood the generators are needed, like 2-3 months ago, it was very difficult to import generators in Ukraine. The trucks had to wait on the border, and they had to pay the whole customs fee. That's why those people who could find generators abroad, they sold this abroad in taking two times more because of this time and fees. And now we have the law that has rectified the situation recently, and we have more or less normal prices now for the generators. But we don't need only generators. There is a whole range of goods which are not produced now in Ukraine, and I believe that central authorities should try to improve the situation in this area, not to earn on the war, but on the contrary. And also, they should look at the goods that can undergo the customs reform in the nearest future, for these goods to be quickly delivered to the consumers in Ukraine. I would also like to add here, this is again an advantage that we observe as external observers. There is no collapse of the financial system of Ukraine, and this is one of the short-term tasks that we should work on, starting from the National Bank and the government to businesses of Ukraine, because without the stable, fully-fledged bank and financial system, we cannot expect the military victory of Ukraine. And we should be happy here, because thanks to some regulation norms as the fixed hryvnia exchange rate and the regulations in import and other norms, Ukraine has prevented the collapse of the financial system. If we look at the exchange range of hryvnia, of course it has changed. It is lower now compared to the USD exchange rate, but that is not what we expected in March and April at the beginning of the war, which was forecast by the international experts. That's why one of the key tasks now is to preserve the banking and financial system to ensure the fairness and predictability for the society, business, and people who have bank accounts and they want to preserve them. Vasylis, the question to you as a representative of the construction business. When it comes to reforms influencing business, what do you think about the draft law 5655? What will be the impact on the construction business? Because the response of the society are quite polar. I can only think how this draft law will work. And I can say that we, the construction companies, need support, but not as it is offered by the draft law. So we need support, but it's different. So with the draft law, any businessman who's a private company, as the GASK, will be under control. And we understand that the investments to the enterprise as GASK will not be carried out by the constructors. So we have the private controlled structure that will control itself. Yes, we understand that we will have different legal entities, some person responsible for this. But we are now talking with you that everyone should have the same fair conditions. So if I have the land now, I need to have the same rules for construction as my colleagues or partners. If we have the private Department of State Architectural and Construction Control, which is called GASK, then the conditions are uneven if you don't have such private company, private department. So we should select the proper way here. The control should be at the state level. And I don't think that a private structure, a private company, can control enough this sector, ensuring the result which is envisaged by the law. Yes, in Europe and in Greece, we have some developments in this area. But so let's study the legal consequences for the company which violates the rule. I am against this law, and I believe that if there are no amendments to this law, it will not be beneficial for the society. And every law should aim to improve the situation for the society, first of all. That's why I hope that there will be amendments to this draft law to make it a really efficient tool to improve the situation comparing to what we have now. This is my personal opinion. Do we have any other questions? Michael, Anna? Michael Vasura, Newsweek Journal. How far is Ukraine from accession to the EU? And now I'm not asking about the specific forecast, but about the range and what can influence this range. Thank you very much. This is a great question. I have a global and specific answer for this. Global answer is it is far, because there are procedural barriers for there. And to access the EU, the country should come through 57 stages, bureaucratical procedures, and different institutions and committees. There are 57 stages, and each procedural stage implies some political, legal, and technical aspects of agreeing specific steps for the future. So there are objective barriers, and it's okay, Ukraine will be able to overcome them. But Ukraine will not be able to overcome this in the upcoming 2 or 3 years. We should also remember that Ukraine, as the candidate country, has the same position as other countries, like the countries of former Yugoslavia that have been candidate countries for 10 years. Turkey has been a candidate country for 23 years. And if to be objective, I'm not sure that Ukraine will be able to come forward comparing to this country. And the rules are the same when it comes to this. When it comes to these 57 stages, so you should be ready to the long work. And actually, it is very important to have as a final goal the accession to the EU. But I would like to speak about specific example. What prevents Ukraine from becoming the EU. And recently there has been a story in Odessa, and there was the explosion of gas cylinder destroying easily the wall of the building. And I think that you've seen this on the news, and this is the example why Ukraine now is not ready to become the EU member state, because there were so many construction violations when it comes to that house. There violation of environmental issues, power supply issues, etc. And to overcome this, Ukraine should go the long way at the legislative level and at the level of business practices in terms of what we construct and what we sell to people. That's why this is an example why Ukraine is not ready to become the EU member states, but I'm sure that with our joint efforts we'll be able to implement the European rules here in Ukraine. This will simplify our way. I can agree with the Dovidas generally, but not when it comes to this issue. I believe that we are in Europe. We have chosen our way to Europe. Yes, there are some legal procedures, and we should take this into consideration, because the EU is not only a concept or a kind of a biology, but here we speak about the legal framework. For the last 4 or 5 years, we have been organizing the forum in Odessa. We invite the international leaders to participate in this forum. And we have been always insisting that there is the only way for Ukraine, NATO, the EU. For the last 5 years, we have been discussing this on our forum. We have invited the ministers from the United States, the Vice President of Europe, and other guests. I don't want to insult anyone, but they kept telling us that we have the corruption, that we have some other issues. But do you think the situation in Greece or Germany is better? Do you think they don't have corruption there? Let's take one step forward. When the German leadership destroyed the power system of Europe, buying gas and oil from Russia, wasn't that corruption? And why those fascists, sorry for this word, attacked us? Because they were mistakes that were made by the people outside. We are common, ordinary people. We have chosen our path. We are here today with us, not far away from Ukraine, because we know that we have the freedom of choice, and we have made our choice, and we should protect it with our own lives. Of course, there are procedures. No one will make this path shorter for Ukraine. Turkey has been taking steps for many years, but Turkey is not successful because they don't want to change anything. Erdogan doesn't want to change anything. They don't want to have the European rules there in Turkey. But the president of Ukraine has our support in terms of the choosing the European path. That's why I believe that this path can be shorter. Of course, it won't be tomorrow or the next year. And I understand that this is quite a complicated legal procedure, but I know that we together have defined our way, our path, and this is the only one. That's why I believe that it will be short, and if it's longer, then there is no way back. Thank you. Thank you for the briefing. Thank you for being with us here today. And I believe that the journalists in the room will be able to communicate with you after the press conference. Thank you for finding time. Thank you for your words. We will meet with our audience tomorrow. This is the last briefing for today. So see you tomorrow.